I'm Peter Geldnes, and I'm going to be your tour guide to the future. When we take a look at news events that emerge on a daily basis, would you believe that these news events are but ripples of a far deeper ocean current? These are the visible sparks of invisible fire. And my journey with you today is to show you what these trends are. What are these currents that are shaping our world? And I'm going to take you on a journey by looking at a variety of different aspects, from the world of demographics to geopolitics to economic regimes to technology trends. And we're going to try and get an idea of what the next couple of decades will look like. So join me on the journey. I'm going to take a look at the future through three perspectives. And when we take a look at these hidden trends which are shaping our world, we need to realize that these trends will actually define not only the next decade, but the next century. We're going to use three lenses in order to define our future. Firstly, there's a famous quote by a person called William Gibson. He wrote the novel Neuromancer. And he said, the future already happened. It is just unequally distributed. Now, you are very fortunate not to be my MBA students, because I keep them busy for about half an hour on that quote. But a small little virus in Wuhan completely altered our history. The future already happened. It's just unequally distributed. However, we need to take a look at the trends that we anticipate. What are the trends that are equally distributed? We're going to start with that. So that's the first part of our journey. Let's go and explore the major trends which will shape our world. Then we're going to pivot. We're going to say, once we understand what these trends are and how they define our world, how can we unlock the opportunities in this space? And that is normally possible by us harnessing new technologies in brand new context. And that is how we unlock the opportunities of the future. We're not going to touch on the last one, but you also have to realize that the future isn't a linear predictive space. It's a complex adaptive system. And because it's complex adaptive, it means that we can't think that any action we take, we can automatically predict the outcome of our actions, not in a complex space. And therefore, when we navigate our journey through this future, we need to realize that we might have a couple of interesting side paths that we might have to follow. Therefore, you need a far deeper insight into the field of complex adaptive systems. Unfortunately, one of those topics that are never covered at university or in tertiary education. So let's get started on our journey. What is my role? My role is to assist you in identifying these underlying trends which are shaping our world. But it should be your task as well. Each one of you should also become a futurist. Your task is to build the capacity to understand and see the implications of change. That's where we're going to start our journey today. I'm going to try and make it as interactive as I can. So after each section, I'm going to ask you to open up your ideas or your minds to some questions. But before we start looking at these trends, just a caveat: I'm not a time traveler. I'm a futurist. So this guy's a time traveler. You know, in 2016, he said, hey, I'm a time traveler from the future. You know, enjoy 2016 because it's as good as it gets for a while. And then in 2020, he said, boy, this tweet really aged well. So no, I'm not a time traveler, but I do hope to share some wonderful insights with you regarding the trends that will shape our future. It's quite difficult to look at or predict the future, because in the year 2000, we were quite optimistic about our future. Everyone read Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man. Liberal democracies will open up and free markets will explode. And yet, the opposite happened in that decade. We had terrorist attacks, we had the financial crisis, and that decade forever changed our world. The question is, what will the next couple of decades look like? And I've got really bad news for you. These decades will actually shape the world far more than the preceding decades. A lot of people say, Peter, I just hope we can go back to the year 2018 or 2019 before COVID. You know, it's always before COVID. And I'm saying to them, I've got really bad news for you. We're never going to go back to that world. It is fundamentally altered. There were a fundamental change in the way in which the world operates. And unfortunately, if you don't take notice of it, it passes you by. Two very interesting things happened in America. They passed 2 acts in 2022. Can anyone tell me what those 2 acts were? The Semiconductor Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. When I heard that, I knew the world will never be the same again. Why? because those acts would never have been allowed before 2020. The World Trade Organization would say, hold on, you as a government cannot unilaterally subsidize a specific industry, because then the rest of the world will sue you. And that's happened. You know, when Europe subsidized Airbus, the guys in America brought out a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit because the European government subsidized the aircraft industry. And yet, here's America doing exactly the same thing in 2022, and not only once, but twice. And then I realized the world changed. These are but some of the news stories that I will share with you. So let's open up and take a look at the underlying trends and see how that will define our world. So when we look at the world 2030, this is coming up again, our friend William Gibson. The future has already happened. It is just unequally distributed. Let's go take a look at these mega trends and how it will shape our world. One of the most important things we have to realize is this, that in the world of demographics, demographics is this destiny. This drives everything you see around you to a lesser or greater extent. And let me share with you some interesting insights in the world of demographics. This is humankind. Before the year 1800, we were less than 1 billion people on the planet. And then suddenly we started growing exponentially. Between the years 2012 to 2022, we added 1 billion people to the planet. So this means that in this century alone, between 1900 and 2000, more people lived in this century combined than in the previous history of mankind. What an unbelievably interesting statistic. So what does that mean? Well, when this happened here in the 1800s, a person by the name of Thomas Malthus wrote a paper and said, we got a problem, people, because this unbelievable growth in human population, that's problematic. And what's really interesting, the population is also unequally distributed. The 3 countries in the world that make up 50% of the world population, number 1 on the list, India. India has surpassed them. Literally, that's an old slide, my apologies. But we have now India, which is the most populous country, then China, and then America, and then Indonesia. But these couple of countries here, 50% of the world population in that circle. Will that be the picture by the year 2100? The answer is no. There will be a different place that will define humanity. Now, getting back to Thomas Malthus, he said, people, we have a problem, because our population is growing at a geometric rate while our ability to generate food and resources is only growing at an arithmetic rate. So he actually said that at some point in time, our population will outstrip our resources, and there we will have war, famine, and disease. What do you think of that philosophy, by the way? We call it Malthus's trap, or the Malthusian trap. What do you think of it? I normally ask my students, so if you think of it, there are less resources now because we mined everything up, and there are 8 times more people than we had in the year 1800. What do you think happened to the commodity prices over the last 150 years? It must have gone ballistic. And then everyone tries to outvote, no, I think it's 1,000% more. And everyone said, no, it's 10,000% more. Then I said, yeah, let's take a look at the Economist figures, and it actually shows that it dropped by 50%. Why? Why is commodities cheaper now in a world of 8 billion people, and yet we're all using up our resources? It's called technology and innovation, because your cell phone doesn't use a copper wire anymore. Technology and innovation allows us to harness our scarce resources, to get far more food per square hectare, to serve a growing world population. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the moment we stop technological progress, then we're going to fall into Malthus's trap. We can no longer live in a world where we have subsistence farming. We've got too many people on the planet. Therefore, we need to be as efficient as we can be in the production of food. And this close symbiosis between us and technology allows us to live in a modern world. A guy by the name of Max Frisch said, technology is the way we structure the universe so that we don't have to experience it. Oh, but that's another philosophy for a different day. But the mere fact is that we've harnessed technology. So why are we sitting in a building and we can talk to each other not in the direct sunlight? We've harnessed the universe so we don't have to experience. Some really interesting ideas. But let's go a step further. According to Malthus, we would have all died when the planet hit 4 billion people. Well, we're still doing fine. And there's an estimate that we will reach 12 billion people by the year 2100. Do you want to know where that growth is going to come from? This continent. We're going to grow from about 1.2 billion people on this continent up to upwards of 3.5 billion by the year 2100. This is what our population pyramids look like. Young at the bottom, old at the top. So those that are my age, we're not a lot. There's a few of us. But you guys, you are the future of this continent. And we need to ask ourselves, how can we grow this continent and unlock its potential? Africa is far too rich to be poor. So let's go and see how we can harness our innovative potential in order to unlock a bright future. But first, we need to understand how the world works. In South Africa, we've seen a slight decline in our population rates. Huge optimism after the outbreak of democracy and a slight decline in years ahead because our economy didn't grow as well. So we need to look at models that allow organizations to grow. A fantastic tip. There is a wonderful TED talk called The 6 Apps a Government Needs to Download in Order to Be Prosperous. It's called The 6 Apps of Prosperity by a person by the name of Professor Neil Ferguson. So go take a look at it. It will blow your minds in terms of what you need as a government in order to unlock the wealth of its population. So when we talk about demographics, that's the interesting side. And the purple line you see on the screen, that's going to be Africa's growth over the next few decades. But do you see something interesting? The other continents are actually declining. If you take a look at where Africa will be by the year 2100, and you take a look at its geography and the number of people in each country, that's what the world would look like by 2100. Take a look at the decline of Europe and Japan and Korea and even China. What is fascinating to realize is that Africa will grow, but there are few parts of that continent where the population can sustain itself in terms of agriculture. And that's going to be the first step in our journey, because with a growing population, more will be required from carbon minerals. We're going to need more fertilizer and more tractors and more distribution. Yet, if we can use new technology to harness new ways of cultivating food, we can turn that around. Very important trend we need to look at. And one of the key areas to drive innovation in this continent. This is the so-called Mercosur map. And the Mercosur map was utilized, and when I was really young, I think I was about 10 years old, I went to my teacher and I said, Mr. Watt. I said, Mr. Watt, I'm worried. You know, this is Australia and this is a continent, right? But that's Greenland. But they're the same size. So why is Greenland an island and Australia is a continent? I don't get it. And he said, no, but you're thinking of a flat map. The Earth isn't flat, kid. You know, it's round. I said, okay, yeah, show me. And on the globe, Iceland or Greenland is a small little island where Australia is quite big. Unfortunately, this flat map that we see in our books completely misrepresents the size of Africa, because Africa is a big place. To really get an idea, within the African continent, you can put the United States of America, China, India, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the British Isles, and Japan. It all fits into the African continent. It's a massive place. And there's wonderful opportunities for growth. Specifically in the electric or the EV industry, there are a number of the metals that or the materials we require for the green revolution is sitting on this continent. So let's go and take a look at some of the other trends that is important. What happened after COVID-19 is a rapid decline in growth rates throughout the world, and this actually happened before COVID. COVID just hastened this trend. This is what a normal economy looks like. You know, old at the top, young at the bottom, that's a pyramid. This was Italy in the 1950s. You can see the impact on the 2 world wars on their population growth. But 70 years later, this is what Italy looks like. They're running out of young people. And Italy's got a huge amount of debt. So they need young people to sustain those that are retiring. And those that are young don't want to be overtaxed. So they say, I'm out of here, goodbye, and I'm not going to have kids anyway. What we are seeing is that this trend is playing out over and over and over. We are seeing this even in places like Korea. Remember on the previous slide, I showed you need about a 2.1 in order to sustain this population in terms of growth rates. South Korea is sitting at 0.68. That country is declining. We are seeing countries like China, which we thought would be the biggest in the world, when they implemented their one-child policy, suddenly, over a period of a couple of decades, they short-circuited this entire process of growing, becoming more prosperous, and then declining and aging. Places like China is now growing old before they grow rich. So this is really concerning, because the rest of the world thought, hey, China will pick up the consumption that was left on the table with the decline of the European population. But now you can't bet on China anymore, and their figures were also wrong. So take a look at the United Nations website, and you will see a fascinating story around China, which is declining. And it's anticipated that China will be half its population by the year 2100, with more than 30% of its population above the age of 65. So and remember, it's not only the size of your population, but the constitution of the population as well. Do you have young people that are working, or people close to my age that are close to retirement? And what you need is a young, vibrant economy that will grow the economy in years ahead. And unfortunately, this story is playing out all around the world. In Japan, currently, they're selling more baby nappies, more adult nappies than baby nappies. I kid you not. By the year 2050, Japan will have 3 times the number of people above the age of 65 than below the age of 18. This is how economies die. This is Germany. If you're a German engineer, well done to you, and you're going to export a couple of nice cars with V8 engines. The problem is, who's going to buy it? Because there's no consumption left in Europe. You need to export your goods. So countries like Germany and a number of other countries in Europe are tightly coupled to the world of globalization, where they make things and export it to other countries to buy. But that world is over. And I'm going to explain why. If we take a look at the rest of Europe, it's not looking much better. And if you take, well, France is still kind of okay. But if you take France out of the equation, look at this. Imagine a world where you have to build neighborhoods, universities, schools, infrastructure. And then 10 years later, there's 10% less people, and then 10% later, there's 10% less people, and 10 years later, there's 10% less people. And one of the key challenges we face is how this will impact geopolitics, how it will influence other countries, and I'm going to explain how this is impacting Africa quite negatively. Massive decline in population rates, growth rates, we've shown you that. But at the same time, while the growth rates are falling, people are growing older. And this is a concern, specifically if they smoke a lot. So let me try and contextualize what the next decade or two will look like. When we take a look at an affluent country, what normally would happen is that you would try and get married at about age 25, and then you get a kid or two. And then you sell your little convertible if you're in a rich country, and then you get a little SUV to get all the kids in. But then it's spend. Because at that point in time, every single thing your kid does until he's 25 years old costs you money. Ask me, I know. The first day at kindergarten, there's like 30 kids in class, and you have to take them to everyone's party and buy a gift for everyone. And then as they grow older, luckily their friends become less, but then the gifts become more expensive, so you lose anyway. And then, you need to buy a cell phone and a computer and an internet contract and a game and Robux. I don't know what the hell that is, but every week my son calls me, Dad, I passed my maths test. Can I get, yes, son. It's like an investment product. Can I get the money back? Can I resell it again, Robux? No, okay. We will have to talk afterwards. Nonetheless, what happens is that if you have an affluent group of people at 25, you know that in this country, there will be demand for products. But what's happening in the rest of the world? These people were never born. And that means that the consumption pattern that is mainly aimed at the younger group of people is drying up around the world. what are we left with? People above the age of 55, my age and older. And the problem is, at age 55, well, not in my case, because I've got kids late in life, so I'm going to be working until I'm 80, just to get my kids to university. But other people were fortunate because they had kids in their 20s, and at age 55, every single currency unit they make, they put away because that's their pension. They don't know how long they're going to live. And what happens? They don't spend the money. Now, our economy is based on the velocity of money. It's a salary I get and I give it out. You get a salary, you give it out. So the economy, it's not about the amount of money in the system. It's about the productivity of the country. And money is but a measurement of the productivity of a country. That's it. And when people are productive, the unit that they are rewarded with for their productivity is circulated through the economy, and that drives our economy. What happens in economy if people have got money they save, but they're not spending it? Consumption collapse. Now, there's a couple of models around the world. In the US, consumption-driven. In Europe, in Germany, it's more investment-driven and technology-driven. In China right now, it is more based on capital investment in large infrastructure and buildings. But the consumption part is very important. It became a bigger and bigger part of economies around the world. What happens if consumption collapses? Now I'm going to take you on another journey. There's parts of the world, like Africa, massive growth in population, but are they affluent? Have they got money? Have they got money to buy convertibles and SUVs? No, they don't. So what is really problematic is that in Africa, we sometimes rely on our exports to the rest of the world. But now that consumption is drying up. So very soon, at some point in time, we will reach a point which we call peak consumption. That's trend number one you need to be aware of. In the next 10, 15 years, we're going to reach a point which we call peak consumption. And at that point in time, a number of products will start declining in terms of its sales volumes. And that's very scary because when we want to export to our partners in the world, there's going to be less of a demand of the products we export. So that means we have a problem. Another important thing about trade policies, if your country looks like this, who do you want to trade with? A country that looks like this. Because you normally have high-end technology, you want to have a manufacturing partner with a lower cost base to manufacture goods, you sell them the high-end technology and you get the low-end products back, both countries benefit. But now America is looking like this, but China is looking like this as well. Definitely not a good trade partner anymore, is it? So the Americans said, yeah, let's go look at Mexico. Okay, Mexico's, yeah, no. Hey, here's India. Now you know why America wants to partner with India because of that new relationship. Trimerica will have to be replaced by Indmerica or something. So that's the new juggernauts we'll have to take a look at. So in the next couple of decades, India will play a pivotal role in world politics because of its unique positioning in the market. Okay, let's leave that one there. Let's go take a look at the second trend. When we take a look at where the big growth is, we see there's massive growth in Africa, but there's one other country in the world which also is showing very positive growth, the United States of America. And what's really interesting about the US is this is what the population pyramid looks like. You can see it's not collapsing like in other parts of the world. This is America. If you take the US out of the rest of the world, you'll actually see that in the more affluent countries, there's a significant decline. And because of this, the United States knows it has the consumption that everyone is after. So remember I told you about these new acts that emerged? This is what the population of most of the countries in the world will look like. China will fall to 50% of its size, so will South Korea, so will Japan, so will big parts of Europe. But the US is growing. They will have the consumption and the affluent consumers that everyone wants to trade with. And it's therefore no wonder that when it comes to trade agreements, they know it. Because they've got the consumers. So what happened with those two acts, by the way? America said, listen, I'm going to subsidize the semiconductor industry, and therefore, if you want to make money, you better put your plant in America. They also say, let's take a look at electric vehicles. If you want to manufacture electric vehicles, 80% of the value of the vehicle must be done in America. But now you're saying, but hold on, I've got the lithium. I want to process the lithium and sell it to you. It's fine, but then you can't get a subsidy. So what we are seeing is a breakup of the globalized order. America is saying, you know, for a period in time there, it benefit us hugely in order to trade with the rest of the world. But now we've got two oceans on either side. No one's going to attack us, and Canada and Mexico is not going to declare war on them anytime soon, according to my sources. And yet they've got unbelievably rich waterways. So the movement of goods in America is really efficient. They are energy independent. Yes, they don't get the energy from the Middle East anymore because through fracking, most of the energy can be obtained from within the borders of America itself. And I'll just show you that. So in terms of the energy imports out of the Middle East, how that has fallen over the last couple of decades. So America is now energy independent. And what this means is that our current world order will now change. Who can tell me what's the word to define our current world order? Come on, it's named after this hotel and where everyone got together in 1945. What's the current world order called? It's named after this hotel. The Bretton Woods Agreement. Well done, well done. If you were online, I would have given you a naughty badge. In our class, that's like you entered the perimeter of wisdom. You know, Calvin and Hobbes-esque, you get it. So Bretton Woods. What did Bretton Woods do? After the Second World War, most of the productive capacity around the world was destroyed in Germany, in England, in France, in Japan, in China. Who was the only big industrial power whose productive capacity wasn't destroyed? The USA. They had massive productive power. So what did they do? They said, "Oh, we don't like the Soviet Union central plan ideas, you know. So let's go and bribe some people to stand in front of us." Then they said, "No, stand beside us." But anyway, you know how it works. And they created Bretton Woods. So all of these countries didn't have any gold left. They all gave it to America to buy weapons and stuff. So America said, no, you don't need to link your currency to gold. We, as Americans, will link our currency to gold. All you have to do is link your currency to our currency. Voila, it's really simple. And we have battle groups around the world. We'll keep the world safe, no more pirates. So if you sign up with us, it's going to go very well with you. And it did. Countries that were decimated by the war, like Japan and Germany, look how they flourished after the Second World War. So for America, Bretton Woods was also firstly about security, and secondly, it benefited all of those countries that chose to be on their side economically. Open market economics, free trade. The Soviet Union said, hey, we want our own buddies. And they partnered with a couple of countries, Egypt, India, Mozambique, Angola. And then a number of other countries said, we are not choosing, we are non-aligned. That's where the non-aligned movement came from. Do you get it? Some people say it's also where First World, Second World, and Third World came from, just for interest's sake. Nonetheless, here is America, and in 1991, what happened? The Soviet Union collapsed. So old George Bush Sr. said, all right, it's time for Bretton Woods 2.0. I'll get some of my guys like Brett Scowcroft and these guys, and we're going to plan a brand new world order. Yes, everyone. Now, George Bush was in an ideal position. He was the head of the CIA. He was the ambassador to China. He was on a first-name basis with every single world leader. And then the Americans voted for Bill Clinton. And what happened? 6 subsequent presidents later, no one even bothered about changing this world order. Why is it problematic? So the dollars that is being utilized outside America is called the, naughty badge, up for grabs, naughty badge, up for grabs, the euro dollar. Were you there, Razak? Naughty badge. Right, so the euro dollar is the way in which we remunerate things on an international basis. 80% of international trade is there. When I go and work in Abu Dhabi, I'm a South African being paid a salary in rands, going to Abu Dhabi, and there they use dirhams, and guess what? In what currency do I get paid when I submit my invoice? Via the London Business School, which is in London, in dollars. Right. Does it make sense? No. And here's the problem. In a low inflationary environment, not a problem. Because whatever currency you utilize, it's just a measurement of productivity. The problem is if that measurement is being skewed by certain forces. And this is what's happening in America right now. There's inflation in America. So what's the only way to fight inflation? You put up your interest rates. What happens when you put up your interest rates? Because it's in dollars, there's an export of inflation to the rest of the world. What happens if they put up the interest rates in America, the money market says, hey, for less risk, I can get a higher return. Let me remove my money from other countries and take it back to America. What does that do? It changes the exchange rate between different countries. So your exchange rate worsens. plus the debt that you have in dollars is now more. So do you see the triple whammy? Export of inflation, reduced exchange rates, and more debt. Although you didn't incur more debt, it's just that your currency worsened. And now you need to pay back a lot more money on the debt that you incurred. This is the movie where the rest of the world is right now. Okay? Oh, and America's got their own debt. Don't worry about that, but it's still the prettiest horse in the glue factory. So, what you need to realize is that we live in an unbelievably interesting world. And a question is being asked, should we change this global currency? Should it be SDR? The special drawing rights at the World Bank, which is a basket of currencies of the yen, the euro, the pound, the renminbi, and you want renminbi and the dollar. A lot of people say, no, let's start a BRICS currency. Okay. You're measuring productivity, and it has its pros and its cons. But the important thing you need to realize is that America is saying, you know what? You know how much money it costs me to have 11 battle groups around the world to keep the world safe? It's not really my movie anymore, I make most of my money by selling software and movies and music, and every time you use your MasterCard and Visa, there's a bit of revenue they get. And so they make most of their money through digital services. From the things they export, although it's considerable, it only makes up 12% of their economy. And if you take Mexico and Canada out of the equation, it falls to 5%. So America is saying, why should we keep the world safe, have battle groups all over the place, people get mad at us when we are in other places, and yet the strategic benefit isn't really there? Welcome to a new era where America is now saying, maybe I shouldn't rely on a global order anymore. Maybe I should take the things that I really, really need, and I just need to make them at home. And if a BMW or a Mercedes-Benz wants to make an EV vehicle, no, sorry, you can't make it in Germany, you have to do it in America. That's the Inflation Reduction Act. That's the Semiconductor Act. You getting the movie? The world of globalization is over. Now, there will be trade between countries, but then these countries will have to figure out how do we keep our ships safe? So one of the predictions we're making is a growth in anti-piracy technology, because piracy will return if the Americans are pulling out from protecting the seas. And then it's only trade routes that you have with specific partners that will be unlock value. Okay, moving on. So the important thing you need to realize is that we are moving into a place of decoupling. And this is how the world is changing. America becoming energy independent. They're already out of the rest of the world. You can see that in terms of military deployments. And decoupling is the big major trend. We've got two trends. I showed you peak consumption and decoupling. Sometimes I hate it when the public or the press publishes the same stuff that I'm talking about, because I'm like, oh, now it's old news. But it does mean that there's some support. So The Economist magazine last week spoke about homeland economics, very good name. That's the new name for this mindset of decoupling. It's called homeland economics. Any comments, any questions from anyone in class? So most of the chip design happens in America, but the manufacturing happens either in Korea, Taiwan, or in China. China hasn't cracked the technology yet for a very, very thin layer on the silicon. The guys in Taiwan have done that. So your high-end microprocessor chips, about 90% of them is made by the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company in Taiwan. And that is a big concern for America, because if China has a blockade on Taiwan and takes over Taiwan, they don't have access to that technology, which is the reason behind that act, to establish the fabs in America. The problem is they don't have the skills for it. Now, one of the key problems that I just want to pivot your way is understand this, that the large, richer countries will look at other countries for skills. We're seeing that a number of healthcare professionals are now leaving Africa to go and work in London and in Germany. I would rather say, hey, send your pensioners to us. Bring them here. We've got wonderful views. Let's look after you over here. So instead of taking our healthcare professionals, send us your pensioners. Maybe we can do a deal. I don't know. Maybe there's a business case there somewhere. So fracking, and if they unlock new resources, they might they might still go for another 2-3 decades in becoming energy independent. So fracking unlocked huge energy resources that wasn't possible in the past. And there's a whole thesis on it and how the technology adopted and changed. So that will keep them energy independent for another 3-4 decades at least. And then the new resources that we see in places like Venezuela and in Chile and so forth, and in Mozambique, that contributes to a diverse world of energy supply. I've got this wonderful, do you know that you can create your very own cryptocurrency in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes. I've got a special coin called IDT coins. Okay. Yeah, it's short for idiot coin. Sorry, IDT coins. Now I have minted about 100 billion IDT coins. If you want to become an IDT coin millionaire, all you need to do is, you know those presidential napkins, those things with the presidential pictures, that garbage money, that napkin money, give it to me. If you give me 1,000 of your presidential napkins, I will sell you 1 million IDT coins, and you can become an IDT millionaire overnight. What can you buy with it? NFTs and feed pics and stuff, but you don't want to sell, you don't want to use cryptocurrency, you want to keep it because it will just grow in value over. I hope you get my idea. Right, so be careful. Things with utility like Ripple, where most of the international banks are using it for the overnight repo rate, makes sense. The original coins like Ethereum as well as Bitcoin, there's some validity behind its scarcity, but be careful of the 10,000 other coins out there. Don't go there. There's quicker ways to lose money. Okay, moving on. I have to be careful to showing this to young people. I don't want you to go into gambling. And I actually showed this slide in Iran the other day, like, whoa, how do you play a poker player off the table? And I thought, that's not the right question to ask. You must have seen it on YouTube, right? So how do you play another poker player off the table? 2 partner against the 3rd. Sounds familiar? Triangular diplomacy. Henry Kissinger, anyone? Recognizing communist China in the 70s to create a counterbalance to the Soviet Union. Get the movie, good. So Donald Trump, he kind of read the summary in the beginning. Let's go partner with the Russians to take on the Chinese. Yeah, it didn't work out that well for him, did it? Anyway, realpolitik. Let's go talk a little bit about some deeper issues. War. This is a picture, I have to be real careful how I state this. This is a picture of all of the defense ministers in Europe in 2016. I think most of them studied BA psychology or something. If you ask them what's the difference between an AKS and an AKM, they wouldn't know what the hell I'm talking about. Except the Polish guy. This fella. Why do you think the Polish guy was a bit more, what can I say, scary than the rest of the gang? And here I made a mistake in my spelling. I apologize. It just shows that I'm original. ChatGTP didn't do this. This is my own mistake. Plain, you spell differently, right? Anyway, you got it. Where does Poland sit? Right there in the middle of the European plains. If you want to conduct a war, do you do it over the mountains or do you do it in the flat grasslands? European plains. This is where Sweden, when they invaded Europe, went through here. And when Napoleon attacked the Prussians, they went through here. And when the Russians attacked, they went through here. And when the Germans attacked, and who's in the middle? Poland, right. So here's a very interesting statistic, talking about the European plains. If you want to protect yourself, here's our friends, the Russians. Sovereign debt crisis in the year 2000, and currently they have a massive dip in their population. So this is the young people that are supposed to serve in the armed forces. They were never born. And Russia's like, we got a problem, people, because we have a border to protect of about 4,000 odd kilometers over here. What the hell can we do? Come on, this is a movie, 20 years in the making, 2000 Kazakhstan, 2000 South Ossetia in Georgia. So pivot point number 1, pivot point number 2, Crimea, 2014, 2022, Moldova, click, click. And directly after that, Letland, Estland, and Lithuania. Get the movie? Because of that, you can protect with a small force. You can't do this. And that's the reason why they went into Ukraine. The fact that if someone puts a security fence around their house, why it's a reason to attack them, I don't know, but let's leave that one there. And that's the reason why this completely collapsed. Huge impact on Africa. We can see that fertilizer exports to Africa as well as food export has got a huge impact, and this has created huge price inflation in Africa itself. As a futurist, we need to contextualize everything that could happen. One of the scenarios we looked at is a collapse of the Russian state by 2040. What happens if the center in Moscow collapses with 200 odd nationalities and different republics? I'm going to tell you what happens. There's going to be a few republics all with nuclear weapons. Poor republics like Chechnya and so forth with nukes. And the rest of the world's going to come to them and say, give me your nukes, and I'll give you a piece of paper called the security guarantee. And then you're sorted. And you're going to say, oh, the exact same security guarantee the guys in Ukraine had, right? Yeah, that one. And what do you think they're going to say? Correct. And what do you think is going to happen with Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, which is like 200 times more richer, when their poorer neighbors all have nukes? What do you think will happen to them? 1 year out and they all also have nukes. So watch out for that space. It's going to be very, very interesting. Be glad you live in Africa, people. Be glad you live in Africa. I'm only kidding. This is just, so I know I kid around, but this is what you need to do as a futurist. You need to start asking yourselves, how will the world unfold, and how do you position yourself from a government perspective, from a technology perspective? Okay, I need to move on. So we're going to see multipolar power blocks, new power blocks emerging throughout the entire world, and a part of it will be driven by our friends in China. China has got their own version of Belt and Road. Can anyone tell me what Belt and Road is called in China? Well, I'm giving the game away. The Bretton Woods system of China is called Belt and Road. Initiative started in 2014, and the idea was to create channels of trade with the rest of the world, but also a secure energy supply to China, because China is heavily dependent on food and energy, and therefore they've got a key requirement to have an interconnected world where they link up to the rest of the ecosystem. At the same time, by developing these trade routes, they also unlock the economies in those neighboring countries, make them richer, and that benefits everyone. Some of the scenarios that we're playing around with: a possible canal in the next 20 years through Thailand. This takes out the Malacca Straits, which is quite problematic in terms of piracy. But if you put a canal through Thailand, similar to the Suez Canal, you can cut the transport between the Middle East and China by 4 days. Or you can put a refinery up in Thailand with a pipeline going through to the other side, and that means you can get long-term security commitments. And take a look at how the Middle Eastern countries are going to play that game. Very interesting to see how the world will change. Another important element that you'll need to consider is a possible blockade of Taiwan, either January 25 or January 29. And this will happen when there's a change in administration in the US. Pivotal time. The last 3 military exercises that the Chinese had did exactly that, a possible blockade of Taiwan. No ships come in, no aircraft come in, that's it. And then they wait until the government capitulates. That's one strategy. That's highly problematic for the rest of the world, because there will be cyber attacks and there will be possible blockades and a variety of other strategies. Watch out for this. This is the next possible conflict area that can be unlocked in the world. Okay? This is collectively known as the depression session, just so that you're aware of where we're heading with this. And to really depress people, we're going to talk about economics. When we talk about a change of season, there's a fantastic book to read called The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe. And what the fourth turning is about is generational theory. I can give you a high-minded overview of archetypes through generations and how they play, but I'd rather take a look at the words of the ruler of Dubai, My apologies for the gender insensitivity, but it's quoted verbatim. He was asked by a journalist what car his grandson would drive. And he said, my grandfather was on a camel, my father was on a camel, I drive a Mercedes, my son will drive a Land Rover, his son will drive a Land Rover, my great-grandson will be back on a camel. Why? Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And we see this over and over and over in human history, where a birth takes place, people live off the fat of the land, there's an unraveling, and then there's a crisis. We see this over and over and over again. Rwanda, massive crisis 25 years ago. Where are they right now? They're busy with the rebirth. And that's the positive side of things. We as humans are unbelievably resilient. We all want to have a better future for our children, for you. And that means that that process continues over time. I'm not a big fan of cycles, but a very interesting comment I picked up. How do you know you are about 4 or 5 years away from a crisis? Throughout history, this was true, even in Roman times. The popularity of chefs. Yeah. So if everyone is talking about is how nice it is to eat at this chef and the nice food that you eat, it's all about gluttony and complacency, the popularity of chefs. Then you go and pivot towards a crisis, and then there's always a rebirth. But don't get stuck on cycles, people. The world is far more complex than to be predicted in a little diagram. What are the 4 factors that you require to drive an economy? How do you drive productivity? What's the foundation of a productive ecosystem? Labor, capital, land, technology. And every now and again, countries and trade blocs repivot those every now and again. The weights are different. Think of an economic regime as a computer, and every 30 years it falls off the table, and then you put the pieces together. It still works like a computer, but the operating system is slightly different. Take a look at how this played out. Second World War. After the Second World War, left-leaning Labour governments were voted in. What happened here? Labour-led growth, right? So Labour-led growth happened in this period. As you create a new model, the inconsistencies in the model starts building up, and over a period of a generation, it then collapses. What happened? Massive inflation, as well as huge labor strikes in the 70s. And the world said, no, we don't like this. What happened? A pivot towards a more conservative view of the world. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher being elected here. What happened? They said, let's pivot towards a more capital-focused growth model. So let's go and look at places in the world where we can get stuff done the cheapest, and let's trade, unlock the growth. Hugely beneficial for China, less so for the wages inside America. But this period here was a capital-led growth system until we had our crisis in 2007, right? And then it collapsed. Now, everyone said, hold on, there everything changed. I said, nope. This was the patient on steroids, and it was called quantitative easing. I'm not going to take you down that journey. I'll give you some resources to look at. I believe the pivot is here. We are now at that pivot in 2020. Now we're moving towards homeland economics. All good? Let me show you another graph. This is the link between productivity growth and wage growth in America. Do you see the pivot in the 70s? We've now entered a new economic regime. What? And I'm not the only one saying it. Damn. Sorry. Now I need to get a new story because everything is out in the open press. So last year, Economist magazine, a regime change in the world economy. BlackRock earlier this year, a regime change. What is the key problem that we're currently facing? A huge amount of government debt. In an environment where inflation was low, it was cheap to go and borrow money. Companies borrowed money, governments borrowed money, and this just ballooned. All around the world, it is truly scary to see how the economies have changed. What happened is credit was created, but then this credit has to be paid back. What do I mean with credit? I go to a bank, I say, I want to borrow money for a house. They say, are you credit worthy? Can we trust you? Will you pay us back? You say, good. then you become the bank's asset, by the way. The house is the liability, you become the asset. Because you're the ones that's going to pay them 1.5 times what you borrow, and you're going to make profit for them. You become the asset. And they can sell you, by the way. Not you, but your income stream. So what happens in this space is that once credit is created, you need to pay back the credit at some point in time. But is anyone paying back this credit that has been created? No, it hasn't. So under quantitative easing, we've seen this unbelievable amount of credit, and that is money that is provided by credit. Its true underlying value haven't yet been manifested, because when you buy a house, you have to work for 20 years. Here's the value that were created. Now you have to work for 20 years in order to solidify that as a true value until it's paid off. And then it's truly part of the economy. But that's the benefit of credit, because it can help economic growth. But unfettered credit, unfortunately, that's where the world is right now. Who's followed the news? Why is the stock markets down around the world? Everyone, you need to wake up to reality, right? Government debt, company debt. 3 days ago, the world market started to fall. Why? Because of this. So unbelievable debt in most countries. Japan sitting at 257% debt to GDP, Italy at 180% debt to GDP, Greece at 200% debt to GDP, and your respective countries, go look at the figures. What we are seeing is that most parts of what we call the rich world is heavily indebted. And this is fine if your inflation is small and if your interest rate is small or low, because then you don't have to pay back as much money. But the moment the inflation rate and the interest rate changes, it becomes a brand new ballgame. And this means that the amount of money in the world to do new things, invest in new technology, do new startups, now's not the time for it. We'll have to wait 3 or 4 years for that again to happen. Go take a look at a website called usdebtclock.org. Fascinating to see how the world is in debt and how that changes. One of the important things you have to realize is you need to understand economics better. Homework for you. Go and look at this video called How the Economic Machine Works. 30 minutes. It's worth a 6-month university course. Brilliant video to go and watch. How the economic machine works. If your memory is not good, take a selfie or a picture. Go take a look at the video. Really, really good. Okay. Key question. Who creates money in the economy, ladies and gentlemen? What institution creates money in the economy? So if you take a look at the amount of money in circulation or the money in the economy, who actually creates the new money?
Banks.
Which bank? No. No.
Central banks.
Which bank?
Central banks.
No. I thought of that as well. 5 years ago, I thought central bank. I was wrong. Who creates money in the economy, ladies and gentlemen? Private banks does. The moment they give you a home loan, they create the money. But then you are the one that becomes their asset, and that can be traded. So they give you the money, but you promise to pay them back for 20 years, so you become the counterbalance. Am I, Peter, saying that? No, I'm not. The Bank of England is saying this. Bank of England, most of the money in circulation is created not by the printing presses of the Bank of England, but by the commercial banks themselves. But they are under very, very tight control of the Reserve Bank because you don't want to give a loan to someone that can't pay it back. So it only works with credit-worthy individuals. And in part of fintech and growth in Africa, what are the ways in which we can create an ecosystem to give credit to someone which is unsecured by trusting who you are and trusting that you can pay it back? That's one of the big fintech challenges. Very interesting to see how the fintech companies in the rest of the world are trying to solve this problem. Look at how the British say things. They're not saying the other people are wrong, idiots. No, they don't say that. Look at how they say it. In contrast to descriptions in other textbooks, the Reserve Bank does not print money. Okay, bank's quite important. I'm not going to take you through quantitative easing, wonderful videos on the internet, but quantitative easing is nothing other than the Reserve Bank taking the debt off the bank and creating fresh money. So if this is the bank's assets, you know, all the loans it gave, and it takes the long-term debt and puts it on the Reserve Bank's books, does the net position of the bank change if that is swapped with cash? No, it doesn't. It's just your long-term debt is given extra money. Now, the entire banking system around the world, how do they get fresh cash? I am a bank, I give a couple of billion to Tanzania to build a railroad, but now someone needs to borrow some money for new oil that comes in. Where does that bank get its money from? Other banks. They say, I will give you the security of the railroad, but give me the fresh cash. It's called the overnight repo rate or the overnight repurchase window. And 10 days later, I say, give me back my stock from the bank, and here's your cash back. That's how banks around the world trust each other, because they trust the underlying value of the assets. In 2006, PNP Paribas didn't trust the assets of the Americans, and that's where the financial crisis started. Okay? Quantitative easing is where the Reserve Bank says our current banking system isn't working anymore. There's not enough liquidity, not enough cash in the banks. Therefore, the banks don't give each other any money. Let us as a Reserve Bank step in and do it. And for the last 14, 15 years, the Reserve Bank created a huge amount of money, fresh money, based on credit, which still have to be created as value if you have to work back 20 years to pay off your house. Are you with me? So a lot of the money in circulation is not backed by assets, but backed by credit. This is why all of the markets around the world are now flashing red. People are realizing what's happening. You get the movie, everyone? Good. Are you depressed? You're not depressed yet. Come on. How do you get share prices going through the roof if the economy is flat? You buy back your shares really cheap. You're the CEO of a company. Oh, we will reward you with a price-earning ratio and your earnings per share. Your earnings per share, there's the managing director of the Artica at the back. She will know what it's about. You get a nice bonus if your earnings per share goes up. Okay, that's nice and dandy, but what if the economy is flat? How do I increase my earnings per share then? I go borrow money really cheap, buy back shares, and instead of having $100 million and a million shares, I have now $100 million in revenue, but only 500,000 shares. So what happens to my earnings per share? Doubles. So the share price goes ballistic. Get the movie? Oh, it's fine and dandy while the interest rate is low. What happens if the interest rate goes up? That's why we have the red warning lights flashing today in today's market. Are you guys getting the movie? Let me show you something else that's scary. Governments spending more than what they get in from taxes. And then they say, but I want to spend more. I want people to vote for me. Yeah, but we don't have the money. Don't worry, I'll go to the banks and borrow from them. And the banks will say, okay, I'll give you money, but how do I know you're going to pay me back? You say, I've got these wonderful, wonderful people in my country. They're called taxpayers. And I'm going to get the money from them and their children and their grandchildren. But what if the people in the country doesn't want to pay that? Oh, it's easy. We throw them in jail. You know, if you don't pay your taxes, that's easy. It's called the control of violence. Guys get the movie? Yes. Yeah. But governments already tax people. So how do governments pay back their debt? Can they raise taxes? Yeah, well, that's not going to happen because tax is already too high. Can they say, I'm not, they try to borrow again, but then the banks say, sorry, I'm not buying your stuff anymore. That's where they are right now. That's why the bonds went up 2 weeks ago. The market is saying, I'm not buying your nonsense anymore. How do governments pay back their debt? Ladies and gentlemen, you need to realize this. No wonder you guys want to get into cryptocurrency. How do governments pay back their debt? They can't say, I'm not paying it. Then you become a Zimbabwe, you become a Venezuela, you become an Argentina. You can't say, I can't pay you back because it's government debt. How do governments pay back their debt? They take a loan over 50 years, and then they say, it's a huge amount of money, but I'm going to depreciate the value of the currency 2% every year. Have you realized that people told you, in the 1960s, for 100 Rand, or $100, I bought a house. Really, Dad? But if you devalue the purchasing power of your currency 2% every year, your electorate and your population doesn't get too mad. They barely notice. Unfortunately, you guys are the ones struggling because of this. Because what happened? 2% year after year after year after year means intergenerational wealth declines. In the 1960s, a person could have one job, have a house, 2 cars, go on vacation once a year. Now people have master's degrees and their partners, and they can barely afford to hire a flat. Do you understand where we are right now? So every time the government says, every time someone says, I want the government to give me money, I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. Do you know what you are saying? You're actually saying, make me poorer and make everyone poorer, because that's exactly what's happening. We might be at the cusp of a deleveraging. If you want to know what a deleveraging is, go watch the movie. You know that other thing I told you about? Are you depressed right now, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. Are you thoroughly depressed? Yet I am not. Because what can you do about demographics? What can you do about economic regimes? What can you do about economic models? Oh, I'm not even getting to climate change. What can we do about those things? Not much. But we can do something about climate change. We can do something about harnessing technology to become more efficient. That's what we can do. And this becomes the counterbalance. These inflationary pressures can be counterbalanced by us being as productive as we can be, armed with knowledge and new technology that doesn't harm the environment. All right. Now, in the last 20 minutes, I'm going to take you on a journey of new technologies. Because technology is something you can use. Technology is something you can embrace, and we can grow Africa to unbelievable heights if we can harness technology correctly. Here's the contractive waves. Every time there's a depression, a spurt in innovation unlocks growth. Then there's a depression, spurt of innovation unlocks growth. For those of you that want to go deeper down this rabbit hole, take a look at the work of Nikolai Kondratiev. We are now at the cusp of the 6th Kondratiev wave, and we think it'll start to emerge by 2026, 2027. Massive depressions, growth. There's no guarantees, but that's what history is telling us. Massive depression, human ingenuity, economic growth. Massive depression, human ingenuity, growth. This, unfortunately, only happens in open market economies. It doesn't happen in centrally planned economies. Okay? So when we look at these massive growth opportunities, on the one end, it creates, on the other end, it destroys. Why is meat cheap in America? Because you don't have that many cowboys anymore. You know, we replace them with barbed wire, so that means cheap, meat is cheaper. You want to pay 4 times more for meat? Bring the cowboys back. So every time there's innovation, we as individuals need to embrace that change. Now, if we want to take a look at the future, unbelievable things will happen. Hold on to your seats. Put on your seatbelts. I'm going to tell you what the future will look like. So we might just become a new entrant onto the Kardashev scale. Who's the Kardashev? Nikolai Kardashev, astrophysicist in Russia in the 1960s, and he classified different civilizations based on their ability to harness energy. Right. A level 1 civilization is a civilization that's able to harness all of its energy that falls into its atmosphere from its local star. Here's planet Earth, here's the sun. If we can harness all the energy that falls into our atmosphere, we become a level 1 civilization. Right. A level 2 civilization is able to harness all the energy of the local star. Put a satellite system around the sun, all of that energy going into empty space, let's grab it, let's beam it back to us through microwaves, we become a level 2 civilization. That's called a Dyson sphere. And a level 3 civilization is a civilization that's able to harness multiple energy sources. The movie buffs amongst you, Space Odyssey 2001 and Space Odyssey 2010 is based on this. Right. How do we know if there's intelligent life out there? We go take a look at a star that has got a Dyson sphere around it. Simple. Check out Tabby's star. Looks interesting. Where are we on the scale as a civilization on this planet? Where are we? We are a level 0 civilization. Why are we a level 0? Because we burn everything to sustain ourselves. We burn coal and oil and gas. And in 200 years' time, what will be left to burn if we are still there? Nothing. We radically have to look at new ways of harnessing energy. And one of the experiments is ITER. Who's heard of ITER? Naughty badge, naughty badge. One person in the audience have heard of ITER. One. Who's heard of Kim Kardashian? Now I am depressed. Now I'm horribly depressed. Everyone knows about a lady that's got difficulty keeping her clothes on, but no one knows about the future of humanity. The international thermonuclear experimental reactor being built in the south of France. And this, 21 countries is funding it. And we are trying to get nuclear fusion going. Nuclear fusion is light isotopes, hydrogen, elements of water, smash them together under very high energy. And once that energy emerges, what happens? We've got almost limitless energy. Take a look at the number of scientific breakthroughs in the world of nuclear fusion. This is a tokamak. Needs a very, very strong magnetic field because the heat in here is so hot it'll melt through that tokamak like that. Now we don't know if the amount of energy we need to sustain that nuclear reaction is going to be more or less than the energy we get out of it, but it seems to me, and initial research shows, we can create it. And once we get this done, we will unlock an entire new vector of human development, a world of abundant energy. So it's going to become immediate, but over 5 or 6 decades, we will unlock energy that our children and grandchildren will harness. What you need to realize, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're at the cusp. In the same way that in the past you paid for megabytes of bandwidth and now you only pay for the connectivity, in the future, you're going to pay for access to electricity, not for the amount you use. And we're already seeing how this world will change. So beyond 2050, we might just enter an era of abundant energy. And the moment you have abundant energy, water is not a problem anymore. Because you can take any water, heat it up, and drink it. Do you understand how these technologies can reshape Africa? Think of small-scale nuclear reactors you can put down to a city. Now you don't need these long power lines that can be sabotaged or broken or stolen. You have a small modular reactor right next to the city. Are you reading the news? In America, they're already building the first prototype. They got authorization this year, January 2023. Guys, you need to stop watching TikTok and looking at Kardashians. You better get tuned in on what's really happening in the world. I'm like seriously worried about you guys, eh? It's like I'm an old fuddy-duddy, close to 60, and I'm worried. You guys need to get with the program. This is what those small-scale nuclear reactors will look like. Small little reactor, look at the amount of cars there. And that's what we'll see popping up around the world by about 2035. We can also use batteries, and we can use the existing fully functioning nuclear fusion reactor called the sun, yes? And we can look at solar in order to generate electricity. The price of solar dropped fundamentally or drastically over the last few decades. And here's an interesting weak signal. In Germany, even although they got a third of the amount of sunny days we have here in South Africa, at some times of the year, they generate more energy than they can use. So sometimes they get worried because they've got so much energy and no one's using it. So they call everyone, please put on your oven and your microwave at the same time and your air conditioner and pretty please. And in order for people to then use the energy, they then pay people to use the energy. That's an important weak signal, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very important weak signal. This tells us we're going to move into a world of very interesting energy politics in the not too distant future. Energy abundance by 2050, one of our predictions. Programmable currencies. This is how funny it is to look at the world around us. On the Yap Islands, they used big pieces of rock as money. We do the same thing. We use as gold. We say, that's money. Yeah, don't worry. We do weird things as humans. Let me tell you an interesting story. This is the town of Wurgel in Austria. And what they did after the Second World War, they didn't have any money left, right? So they took their 60,000 gulden, put it in the bank, and then created a note that looked like this. But this was called demurrage. Now what demurrage means is you need to pay the money to make that note tradable. So at the end of each month, you need to put a 1% stamp on it, otherwise you can't use it as money. Okay? Bear with me. What is the circulation of money normally in economy? It's about 9, 10 times a year. So I get a salary, I give it to someone else takes that money. So one unit of currency circulates about 10 times in the economy. What do you think happened in Virgo? So this guy got this note and said, yeah, okay, that's interesting. I don't want it. I better get rid of this like really soon, because if I'm the one stuck with it at the end of the month, I'll have to pay the 1% tax on it. So yeah, give me that cheese. And the guy with the cheese said, I don't want this, give me that cow. Or let me buy timeshare in the cow. And suddenly, everyone started swapping this money around like you won't believe. Suddenly, this town was building bridges and roads, and the economy was booming, and everyone was selling, and all the other towns said, but where'd you get the money? The guy said, no, we haven't touched our money. It's still in the bank. The velocity of money went close to 3,000%. Now, how weird is it we as humans have to wait for something, a little piece of paper, before we do it? Look at what they're doing in Rwanda. They're going out and they clean their streets. Are they waiting for a piece of paper to go and clean it? No, they don't. Do you see how their heads have moved to a new future, to a new beginning, to being reborn? And all we are waiting is a little piece of money before we do something, a little piece of paper. By the way, when the government realized they were doing this, they stopped it because no one was using the government's money anymore. So anyway, interesting experiment. Why am I telling you this? The Chinese did it 2 years ago with digital Rwanda renminbi. They gave everyone money, and the moment you tried to save it, they say, if you save it, we're going to take it back. Because they want to facilitate the velocity of money in the economy. Okay? Watch out, it's going to become. So one of our predictions, government-backed cryptocurrencies coming your way very, very soon. Pros and cons. We are going to see a new gorilla game, VR. I've got the new Quest in my car right this morning. Augmented reality, wonderful opportunities in training. We are getting people to import new technologies, but then the guy said, but who will maintain it? You say, don't worry, you have a medium-skilled technician. He puts on a pair of goggles. Somewhere else in the world look through their eyes, and they can repair anything you want. Now people are saying, all right, that sounds cool, and we can use it for a variety of things, but how will we connect this? Oh, there's beautiful connections out there. This is the Amazon speakers. Do you know what these Amazon speakers do? They all talk to each other. Now, when you track something, it drains the battery because you need to speak to a base station 20 kilometers away. But if you only speak to a speaker close to you, then these batteries can last for 5, 6 years. And this is what we're seeing, this unbelievable niche of technologies that can track things. Believe it or not, I track my remote control, I kid you not. I track my wallet and I track my phone using these tags. But I pick it up through someone else's phone. So it's a short distance. It's called ultra-wideband technology. I'll tell you about that later. What will this do to Africa? Well, 5G technology will allow us to connect IoT devices. It allows you to put a sensor in a garbage bin to tell you if the bin is full or not, to help you reroute your traffic and garbage collection. It has a sensor underneath the ground to look at your sewage pipe. And if the sewage pipe starts blocking up, you can repair it before the sewage starts overflowing. Really cheap, very efficient, really nice. But how do we connect these things together? Here's some other interesting things. With our work in Abu Dhabi, we started, the guys on a track, and they acquired 2 of these. These are called the Zeppa Airbus, or the Airbus Zeppa. They stay in the air for 60 days. Fly twice as high as an aircraft, but they've got zoom cameras to zoom in on anything. Now suddenly you can be far better on crime, because you can turn back time, because this entire sensor records the entire city, and now you can take a turn back in time. You start stopping cash in transit robberies, murders, and so forth. In the next 10 years, these things will change security in Africa. What else? Connectivity. In the past, if we wanted to connect to a satellite, there is no thing like escape altitude. You only have escape velocity. You have a rocket goes up, then the rocket starts turning like that. If you're closer to the Earth, it's quicker. You go further from the Earth, it's slower. At 36,500 kilometers, it falls around the planet at the same rate at which the Earth turns, and we call that a geostationary satellite. The problem is, for internet, it's quite difficult, because you have to ping your ping packet. It takes you about 3 seconds. So the idea is to have satellites really close to the planet. The problem is they keep on zipping past. Can anyone tell me what that new satellite system is called? Starlink. Who knows about Starlink, ladies and gentlemen? Can I get your hands, please? Okay. Guys, I don't want to sound funny, but you guys need to get with the program. Like him and everyone else. You are the leaders. You are our future leaders. You need to understand these technologies. Starlink system available in more than 20 African countries. There's a fascinating website called satmap.space. And it means that wherever you are, you've got a satellite above you and the dish turns with it. Speeds of 200 megabits a second. And that means that any school in the middle of nowhere can now get high quality education directly beamed by the satellite. This will change Africa. Better communication, cheaper communication, better energy, more agriculture. The future is yours. It's yours to embrace it. Let me finish off in the last 5 minutes. We started slightly late. We started about 1:15, so I've got another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to the next speaker. But let's go take a look at a couple of things. In the same way, you can download an app on your phone. To change the functionality of your phone, you can download an app on a smart camera. And that means you can change the functionalities of these cameras. For those of you going into engineering, very nice little hobby. All right. You can now pay for things at KFC, the Kids Fattening Center, and all you need to do is smile. Smile to pay. Then there's one guy that said, what are all these strange dogs doing in my house? So he trained his little Raspberry Pi to only open the door for his dog. And then there was someone very mad at his cat because his cat kept on catching mouse and birds. So now he's not opening the door if the cat has got everything in its mouth. Interesting world we live in. Scanners. What are the new technologies doing? It normally takes you 2 weeks to take a sample and get the results back. Right now, with technology like this, you can keep the sample in your hand, speak to your phone, and get a result in 10 seconds. Water quality, pesticide checking, health linkages to food, unbelievable opportunities that we can unlock in our healthcare system, in our economies. We are going to see wonderful things happening. Can anyone tell me what happened on the 4th of July 2012? Anyone? No, Kim Kardashian did not bring out a new lipstick. That wasn't it. It was the discovery of the Higgs boson vector. I'm fighting a losing battle here, guys. This particle gives mass to everything around it. And now that we understand its location, we can, through mathematics, start creating smart materials. 2030, we might see stuff like this. A car where the body panels of the car can store the energy, making it lighter, faster, cheaper. When your daughter comes home by 2030 and says, Dad, I scratched the battery, you better be worried. All right. Last session. One of the keys to unlocking growth in Africa is you need to become doctors. Your own doctor. Let me tell you why. We need to pivot from a sick care system to a healthcare system. Not train people for 6 years to help people after they're already ill. We need to train people to stay healthier for longer. We need to start on a new journey. You are the youth of Africa. Start embracing this. Let me explain why. Make sure that when you have a young child, to feed them high omega-3 foods to help with brain formation. Put them in on a program like the Artika Fia is busy with, called Abasorg, which is looking at disadvantaged communities and bringing young people in to show them how they can explore the world. Because in a preschool environment, it creates those patterns in their brains that helps them to be school ready when they turn 6. Because without a good diet and without exposure to new ideas, the brain formation doesn't happen. Then you're too late. So start there, preschool. Once you start in preschool, and now I'm getting seriously dangerous territory here, but I love agency. I love people that can make decisions for themselves. I love the model that they have in some Northern European countries where they give vouchers to the parents. And the parents can decide where to spend the schooling voucher. So the schools that don't perform, you don't give your voucher to them. It's still taxation money, it's still free education, but you as a parent decide who gives the best valuation for my school. So when you become president of a country one day, think of giving agency to your citizens. Let them make the choice how you want to spend that money for their children. But once that is done, you need to start realizing what foods are bad for you and what isn't. Now, for some people, some foods are good, some isn't. I'm like a health fanatic. This is my Aura ring. I track my heartbeat, sleeping patterns for a reason. Because 10 years ago, I did a DNA analysis. And my DNA analysis told me, I got a problem. Cost you about $100, bit expensive, and we hope that this should be, I think, a human right to test your DNA. Because if you test your DNA, you can determine what your lifestyle should be. And you don't need to worry about reading your own report. You only have to get someone else to read it and tell you what to do. In my case, I'm absolutely geared to get early onset Alzheimer's. I've got 10 years. Will I get it? Of course I won't. Why? Because I'm changing my lifestyle and diet. So, let me 4 minutes to show you how it works. This, I've got ApoE alpha. I've got this. It's one little molecule, one DNA code out of a string of 256. One, that's wrong. And this means that the proteins that is made in my body cannot remove sugar from my bloodstream. So it means no sugar for Peter, no carbs for Peter. So I have to pivot to a different diet. That's what's happening to the proteins in my body. I'm one of the, we call it lucky or unlucky 3%. And this is what's happening in my brain. My brain cuts it like this, so that this becomes the scissors to the next one, and that means I've got amyloid betas that pack up in my brain. But, there's something called epigenetics. In brief, your DNA is your code. Then there are little runners that go to the code and say, hey, how do I need to print this protein? So the messenger RNA goes to the cell and then prints in the cell a protein. But if the building material isn't there, it can't build the bad proteins. Are you with me, ladies and gentlemen? So what is poison for me might be food for you. Most of you out here, you're good with grains. Me, no. The point is it better to be proactive in staying healthy for longer or only going to the doctor after you become ill? You need to start looking at living a healthier lifestyle. And this isn't for everyone, but find out what is your key. This is my lifestyle. High omega MCT oils, polyphenols, ketones. I do intermittent fasting. Why? Because instead of feeding my brain with sugars throughout the day or triglycerides, I try to feed it for 2 hours every day with ketones. Where do I get the ketones from? My fat cells. So intermittent fasting, I don't eat for 18 hours on a day. I don't really get hungry because if you eat a fat diet, you don't get hungry. But that means that my fat cells create ketones that feeds my brain for 2 hours a day. And that means my brain will never shut down because of an overload of triglycerides. Are you getting the movie? Find out what is your lifestyle. Find out what is your DNA. Find out what you need to do to live longer and healthier. Because the healthcare crisis in Africa will continue if we don't watch what we eat and how we exercise and our lifestyle choices we make. Tobacco, too much alcohol. Who am I talking to? You guys are still young. We are seeing a pivot from a healthcare system, from a sick care system to a healthcare system. One of the technologies we haven't touched was artificial intelligence. We haven't got that. If some of you want to see, I'll make some of my videos available online to show you all the wonderful things you can do with large language models, but that's a debate for a different day. The point I want to make is this. I've taken you through a disturbing journey about what are the trends which are shaping our world. But underneath that is a message. I want you to become aware of these trends which are shaping your future. Be an active participant in that conversation, in the discussion. You are the future leaders of this continent. Start reading the right books, the right material, start looking at the right videos. Once you have understanding what the world looks like, think of the technologies, new practices, ideas that we can borrow from others and apply on this beautiful continent so that we can make everyone more prosperous. Because once you start in a small community and you become innovative and entrepreneurial and wealth is being built, harness the options of open markets where individuals have agency, where they can choose what they want. And harnessing this capability, we can unlock an unbelievably prosperous continent. Never stop learning. Log into those satellite systems and once you've done your degree, continue learning. Because we've got a wonderful continent, and if you can bring the skills to this continent, we can unlock unbelievable value. It is my hope and my dream that you will have a prosperous life, that you will use the resources available to you, and that not only use it, but also give back to the community around you and to grow your communities. It has been my honor and privilege. Thank you for your time.